Hello everyone, this is chapter 9 from ABA 2nd edition. This is a brief summary of my own understanding. My name is Hadiya Iskander. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. This chapter talks about multiple baseline and changing criteria designs. The first design is a multiple baseline design, and based on Baer and colleagues, they described it as the design in which a number of responses are identified and measured over time to provide baselines against which changes can be evaluated. With these baselines established, the experimenter then applies experimental variable to one of the behaviors, produces a change in it, and perhaps notice little or no change in the other baselines. If so, rather than reversing the just produced change, he instead applies the experimental variable to one of the other as yet unchanged responses. So this basically means that first you take baseline data on different behaviors or subjects or settings, and then once you see stable baseline, you start introducing the first treatment or the dependent variable. And once you see change in this treatment or behavior based on the treatment, you go to the next behavior and introduce a variable once more. It's a little bit confusing, so let's look at one of the design graphs here taken from the book. So what happens is that you start taking baseline on, say, different behaviors. And of course, they have to be related in some way, so they may be 3 behaviors that have the same function. And once you see the baseline start to stabilize, you introduce the treatment. And once the treatment is stable, but the change in treatment is stable, you go to the next behavior and you introduce the same treatment to the second behavior. And once this treatment is stable, or the behavior changes is stable, then you go to the third behavior and you introduce the treatment to the third behavior. And that's why you have a shorter baseline here than this one and this one, because this baseline had to wait for two behaviors to reach stable. Behaviors has to be stable before you introduce the variable to the next behavior. So this one here, the third behavior, had longer phase of baseline because we were waiting for these 2 behaviors to stabilize. Let's look at the 3 basic forms of multiple baseline design. It could be across behaviors, so you can choose 2 or 3 behaviors to look at and first collect baselines on all of them, and then you start with the one that has the most stable baseline to introduce the treatment. You can look across settings. So if you're working on the same behavior in different settings, such as a playground, classroom, and home, then you can start taking baseline on the 3 settings and then start introducing the treatment to the specific behavior you're looking at, trying to increase or decrease in one setting. And once this change in the behavior has the treatment has been effective and you see a stabilized behavior change, then you go to the next setting and you introduce your treatment there. Finally, across subjects or groups, so if you're maybe using a reading program and you want to see if it's effective across different groups of students or different classrooms maybe, then you can start taking baseline data on reading behavior or reading levels on all in different groups, on all maybe the subjects in one classroom. You introduce the program to one student, and once you see change in it, the change is effective, then you introduce the reading program to the second student, and that becomes an across subject or groups design. There are 2 variations of the multiple baseline design. There's a multiple probe design and a delayed multiple baseline design. Let's start with the multiple probe design. So it's basically to analyze the relation between the independent variable and task sequence or successive approximations. So you use this one when you have a task analysis you're trying to teach maybe, or you're using shaping to teach a behavior. So there are 3 key features for this design. The first thing you do is that you do an initial probe is taken to determine the subject's level of performance on each behavior in the sequence. So you start to understand, your client's skills in each of the behaviors or each of the steps you're going to work on. And then a series of baseline measures is obtained on each step prior to training on that step. So then again, you try to take baseline data on each one of them before you introduce the treatment, and just to see, where you're starting, basically. What is this student is able to do, and what the steps are he's able to do independently, what the steps are he's not able to do at all. And then finally, after criteria level performance is reached on any training step, so you start with maybe it's step 1 and the student or the individual you're working with has reached the the criterion level, then you're gonna start the treatment in the next step. However, before you do that, you do a probe of each step in the sequence. So you're gonna do a probe again, examining all the steps to determine whether performance changes have occurred in any other steps. Okay, so that's the third part to the probe design. It looks like this. So I thought it would be easier to look at the visual from the book. So here, this square represents the probe. So you start with this one. So you do a probe on each of the steps, or in the behavior or the behaviors in the task analysis you're working on. And then you do baseline in this one here, first one. And then you start with the treatment, and once the criterion you have has been reached, you do another probe. Now you're doing this probe for all of the steps, not just this one. Okay, and then once this reach, it's like the multiple baseline, the classic original one. You're gonna start baseline with the second step, start the treatment, and here you're starting the baseline only when this step has been the criterion has been reached. Then you start baseline, and then once it's stable, you start the treatment. You go to the level determined, the criterion determined. Then you do a probe for all of the steps, even the first one here. Okay, and so forth. And then you keep doing this, and then at the end, of course, you do a probe for all of them to compare it with the first one you did. Okay, so that's the way you do the multiple probe. The delayed multiple baseline design is the second kind of multiple baseline design, and it's an experimental tactic in which an initial baseline and intervention are begun and subsequent baselines are added in a staggered or delayed fashion. So as you see here, the very first one we spoke about, the multiple baseline design, you usually start with baseline at the same time, and then you start your intervention. But here you're doing a baseline on the behavior number 1, but you haven't started in the other 3 ones. And then later you start baseline the second one, and then maybe later the third one, and then you're gonna wait for a very long time to start the fourth baseline here for the behavior number 4. Why is this? Usually it's there's 3 situations when you use this delayed multiple baseline design. And one of them is that you could have possibly limited resources, so you're unable to actually collect baseline on all the 4 behaviors at the same time. So you're going to have to start with 1 or 2, and then when you have the resources, you're going to start the third one. And that's why the baseline for the third behavior may be delayed than the first and the second, for example. Okay, because you couldn't collect baseline data for all the 4 behaviors at the same time, or start them at the same time. It could also be because there's a new behavior that had just appeared, and now you want to take baseline data on it. So the baseline will be delayed because this behavior has not been there when you started your program or you started taking baseline. So you may have baseline had started in the first behavior, and that's only one behavior you're looking at, or maybe 2 behaviors you're looking at. And then you realize there's a third behavior you want to take data on, and then you start the baseline, and that's why it's delayed than the other 2 behaviors. Another situation, it could be that the reversal design is no longer desirable or possible. So basically, in applied settings, the research environment may shift. So it could be that previously a treatment has been, provided to one behavior, and this behavior has changed in some way, but it hasn't been back to baseline. So you're waiting for this behavior to go back to baseline levels in order for you to start taking baseline data. Okay, so there's some factors that had impacted the behavior, and now you're waiting for it to go back to normal or to go back to baseline level for you to start collecting the baseline data. Okay, so basically the multiple baseline design is you have to consider a few things when you're using it. You of course have to use behaviors that have the same function, because if you are providing a treatment, the same treatment to all behaviors, then this treatment should be looking at the same function. So these behaviors have to have the same function behavior. So it could be that all behaviors are due to attention, or all behaviors are due to escape. So you really have to be careful when you're choosing the behaviors you are going to use this design on. Also, you have to select concurrent and related multiple baselines. So again, the way you're collecting the baselines could not be, or it should not be, very different. You cannot be using discontinuous measurements in one of them while using continuous measurements in the other one to collect baseline data, because then they wouldn't match, and you wouldn't be concurrent, or they wouldn't give you enough information to be able to say that, okay, now this baseline is stable, and you wouldn't be able to compare your treatment when it's provided for one behavior versus the other, because the way you're collecting data is totally different. Also, you don't want to apply the independent variable to the next behavior too soon, because again, you want to have a stabilized data before you start implementing the treatment to the next behavior, because then you are able to say there is a functional control or experimental control. Also, you want to vary significantly the length of multiple baselines, so you cannot decide that you're going to take baseline only for 5 days for each behavior. You might want to do 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, and this way your data will be more valid, and you'll have a stronger design. And then you also want to intervene on the most stable baseline first. So even though you had in mind an order of behaviors to start your treatment on, you really shouldn't have an order. You should just start your treatment on the behavior that has the most stable baseline first. Okay, so that's basically the multiple baseline design. The second one on this chapter is a changing criterion design, and the changing criterion design is a design that can be used to evaluate a behavior or skill already in the individual repertoire, because basically you're using a behavior that already exists, but you want to improve it. So you keep changing the criterion level. So after stable baseline responding has been achieved, the first treatment phase is begun, in which reinforcement is contingent on the subject performing at a specified level, which is a criterion you have. A series of treatment phases are then used, and each requiring improving level of performance. So each phase requires a different level of criterion, and of course it has to be a better one, which means you're trying to improve the behavior to get to a better level or higher level, either by increasing it or decreasing it. There are 3 features to determine the potential of a changing criterion design to demonstrate experimental control: the length of phases, the magnitude of criterion design, the magnitude of criterion changes, and the number of criterion changes. So for the first one, the length of phases, basically, because each phase in the changing criterion design serves as a baseline for comparing changes in responding measured in the next phase, each phase must be long enough to achieve stable responding. So this is very important. Also, the magnitude of criterion changes So varying the size of the criterion changes enables a more convincing demonstration of experimental control. Then finally, the number of criterion changes. So in general, the more times the target behavior changes to meet new criteria, the more convincing the demonstration of experimental control is. Okay, so this is the number, this is the change in criterion design. And just for us to understand it better, this is a visual from the book. And you start with baseline, and then you do your criterion levels or phases. So here, 60 was the criterion level, and as you see, they were trying to decrease the behavior. So they continue to take data until it went down below the criterion level, or reached the criterion level, and then they went to the next phase. They reduced it to 40 as a criterion level, and the participant was able to do it right. I'm sorry about that. And then 20, and then 18, 16, 14, and 12. And as you can see for the 12, she even started with, the criterion level, like she was able to go under it, and her behavior was decreased. So that means she reached the criterion level even from the first try here. Okay, so they were successful in reducing her behaviors. So I just want to say that the criterion changing criterion design has advantages and limitations. So the advantage of it is does not require reversal withdrawal, so you really cannot go back because you're just trying to improve the behavior over and over again, or like not over and over again, but you're trying to improve it to different levels, higher levels. It enables an experimental analysis within the context of a gradually improving behavior, and thus complementing the practice of many teachers. So as you see the behavior improve, you kind of feel that the treatment is working, and it's nice because it's already in the person's repertoire, and you're not really teaching new behaviors, and you're not really experimenting to see if this treatment will work or not. You're really experimenting to see if this behavior can be improved, and how much can it be improved. The limitation for this design is, again, that you really have to use a behavior that's already in the repertoire, and it's not something new to the subject or the individual you're working with. Again, this is a very, very brief summary of Chapter 9, Cooper book. Thank you so much. If anyone has questions, please send me a message, and I really appreciate all your support. Thank you very much.